From a darkened room in a relatively isolated location in Alaska, a 38-year-old woman reaches out to the rest of the world through a journal she posts on the web. In a collection of stories she writes regularly about her son, she documents a 10-year journey.
My name is Carone Sturm. I have a background in journalism, which gives me some added benefit in that I've learned how to research a subject, to find answers to questions. Little did I know that one day I'd write a story about my own life and post it on the web. It's a story I feel is important to share. It's really an evolving mystery story. I'm not sure where it's going to end quite yet, but I do know where it began.
She had a pretty nice pregnancy, as I recall, maybe some morning sickness, and then went on to have a successful delivery.
But he just never stopped crying, and so that was a concern. And he was also bruised. He had a bruise on his head that we couldn't explain.
But he did have what I thought was a cephalohematoma, which is a large bruise on the top of his head, to the point that we actually got an x-ray of his skull.
And that was such a scary thing. I thought, my God, you know, my infant baby going in for an x-ray.
But that didn't show a skull fracture. So we just chalked it up to the birth.
Because he was born with jaundice, Jojo was placed in an incubator. Carone noticed he acted differently than her first child did at birth.
He cried a lot, you know, when he was in the little incubation device with the lights, and he cried a lot when he got home, much more than our first baby had. I figured he was just fine, that he was just a fussy baby. You know, about that time we had friends, and I knew a lot of people who were having kids and, you know, talking about what it was like to have a colicky baby, so I assumed it was either that or, you know, I mean, he checked out fine with the doctor, so there wasn't really anything specific.
On most days, Carone stayed home and looked after Jojo. But one day, she left her son in the care of her husband, John. When she returned just hours later, she opened the door to her home and was startled by what she heard.
And just heard this horrible screaming. I mean, I just froze. This was a different cry. There was something going on. I ran up the stairs as fast as I could, and I saw John holding the baby, rocking him, trying, you know, so hard to comfort him. But he just continued to wail. I mean, he was really having some sort of problem that we didn't understand.
John and Carone took Jojo to the hospital. At first, the diagnosis seemed simple, but disturbing nonetheless.
Well, she came at around 5 weeks or so when he had a very loud crying episode. And we evaluated him, and it seemed like it was his stomach.
The doctor left to write up the orders, and I believe I handed the baby to John, who put him on the table to put him in his warm, you know, coat, as I was putting things in the baby bag. And then I just heard him say, "Look at this." And I turned and saw Jojo laying there on the table with both arms and one leg flailing in the air, and the other leg just laid there, limp. So I raced out of the room, and I said, "Bob," you know, our doctor said, "Come back here, get in here." And he came rushing in, and he looked at the baby, and he looked up at us, and he said, "Who's been watching this child?"
We went on and did an x-ray at the hospital, and they discovered that he had a femur fracture, which was unexpected.
You know, we could hear him screaming and screaming and screaming, and this went on and on. Oh, it was clear that many of them thought that we had beaten our child.
At this point, Carone feared they would be accused of child abuse. This accusation intensified after doctors continued to x-ray Jojo.
Subsequent x-rays on that particular day showed that he also had other fractures on the rest of his body. So he looked like, on x-ray, a battered child.
He said that he had as many as 4 or 6 fractures. And I mean, that's when the room just started spinning, And he said, I've got to tell you that this looks like a typical case of battered child syndrome. And if it's not that, it's a very rare bone disease that I've never seen in my practice, which is called osteogenesis imperfecta. And I think I knew at that point that there was no question that's what JoJo had.
This was the first time the doctors working on JoJo's case had come face to face with osteogenesis imperfecta. For Carone, suddenly all the pieces of the puzzle began to come together.
4 times its normal density.
Not only did all those pieces fit, you also thought about these things that you did, for instance, putting him in the backpack and pulling his little legs down, and, all of these things, it was, they just kind of rushed through your mind. So, yes, all those pieces made much more sense at that moment. And that explained why he had been so miserable at birth, as he had actually broken his collarbone.
The Sturms decide to take JoJo to Seattle for a second opinion. They're scheduled to see Peter Byers, a doctor at the University of Washington Hospital.
Oh, great. This is the new gel. It's very light. I'm sure it'll be very difficult to see, but he certainly has something that's unusual there. I don't think anybody wants their child to have something that is certainly going to be with them for the entire, for their life. On the other hand, there's an explanation for what's happened. And that explanation gives them the potential and the hope that there is something that can be done.
Through DNA analysis, Byers confirmed JoJo had osteogenesis imperfecta.
It's very much a mixed blessing in that sense. It means that they're no longer worried that they did something to the child, that they harmed the child by doing something wrong, but instead that the child was susceptible to injury that anybody could have caused, and that it wasn't their fault. It raises the other feelings about where did it come from? Did I cause this? Was it that fall down the stairs? Was it that drink I took? Any of the things of that sort that come up? And the answer is no. It's a genetic condition, and the reason that it affects bone is that there are changes in the genes that make the major protein or the major structural part of bone, which is called collagen.
Collagen is the major protein of the body's connective tissue. Imagine the structure of a typical building with metal rods inserted into cement to stabilize and give flexibility to the building. This is similar to what collagen does in the human body. In osteogenesis imperfecta, a person either has less collagen or a poorer quality of collagen than normal, leading to weak bones that fracture easily, often from little or no apparent cause.
In addition to being fragile and brittle, the bone doesn't hold its shape very well. So the legs may be bowed, the arms may be bowed, and just the normal formation of the normal shape of the bones is really quite affected.
Sean Stevenson has one of the most severe forms of osteogenesis imperfecta. Even the act of getting out of bed in the morning can be a struggle.
I'm no different than anyone else on the inside. And that really needs to come across right here and right now, that I'm no different than you are. And I think a lot of times we get caught up in this exterior package as if I chose it. The way most people look at it is that it must be grueling, it must be frustrating not being able to do all these things on your own. And I'm sure that there were moments in my life when they were. In the early stages of my life, I felt like so frustrated to have this. I think, honestly, everything that I have to go through in my life is more exciting than most. Most people just scratch the top of their head without even thinking about it. Every day, I'm constantly humbled.